The first thing you learn on the Montana frontier is that a man's belt has two uses. One is for holding up his pants, the other is for breaking a boy's spirit. And in the 2 years I'd lived on his homestead, Jeremiah Whitman only ever used his for one. He called me boy, sometimes burden. On a good day, the $25 mistake, which is what the county paid him every month to keep me alive. My name, the one my mother gave me before the fever took her, he never used it once. It was a ghost on my tongue, a word I hadn't heard spoken aloud since I was 10. I was 12 now, but I felt 100. Each one of those years earned in scars and silence. My left leg was twisted from birth, a gnarled root of a thing that made every step a lurch, a painful wobble that announced my presence wherever I went. To Jeremiah, that limp wasn't a misfortune, it was an insult, a personal offense against his idea of a proper world, a world where things were straight and strong and useful. I was none of those things. You worthless piece of scrap. His voice ripped through the morning chill, colder than the frost on the water pump. I was in the chicken coop, trying to scatter feed, but my hands were trembling so badly the grain was spilling all over the dirt floor. My leg was on fire today, a deep, throbbing ache that went all the way up to my hip. The trough, boy, not the ground. Do you think feed grows on trees? I flinched, my shoulders hunching up to my ears. It was a reflex I'd perfected, the turtle-like cringe of a creature who knows a strike is coming. I'm sorry, Mr. Whitman, I mumbled, my voice swallowed by the anxious clucking of the hens. My hands are cold. He spat a brown stream of tobacco juice that landed an inch from my boot. His face, a roadmap of sun-baked lines and bitter disappointment, twisted into a sneer. He was a man hollowed out by loss. His wife, Martha, died giving birth to a baby who never drew a single breath. His cattle herd was wiped out by the blizzard of '86. All he had left was a failing farm, a mountain of debt, and me. And he hated me for all of it. Cold hands, he snarled, his own hand drifting down, his fingers finding the familiar worn leather of his belt. The sound of it sliding through the loops was the drum beat to my nightmares. My Martha worked this land with her hands bleeding and never once complained. She could have done the work of 3 of you before breakfast. The mention of his wife was a special kind of poison. In the first few weeks after I arrived, before she got sick, Martha had been kind. She'd look at my leg not with disgust, but with a sad sort of understanding in her eyes. She'd sneak me an extra biscuit when Jeremiah wasn't looking. She was the only warmth I'd ever known in this place. And then she was gone, leaving me alone in the permanent winter of her husband's rage. The belt came free with a slick, practiced whisper of leather. Promises don't mend fences, he growled, the strap coiling in his hand like a snake. And you're about to promise me you'll never spill my feed again. I dropped the feed pail and threw my arms over my head. The chickens scattered, a feathered explosion of terror. Their squawks were the only screams in the coop. I'd learned long ago that my own screams just made it last longer. The first blow landed across my back, a line of pure fire that stole my breath. It felt like being struck by lightning. The leather bit deep, a searing shock that made the world go white for a second. Another came down, then another, methodical, even, the rhythmic punishment of a man venting every failure, every disappointment, every last drop of his life's bitterness onto the small, hunched frame of a crippled boy. You're broken, he roared between strikes, his breath coming in ragged pants. Just like everything else I touch. A curse. I collapsed into the dirt and chicken droppings, curling into a tight ball. Through the blur of my tears, I saw the hens huddled in the corner, their beady black eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own. I wasn't a boy to them. I was just another animal trapped in the same pen, helpless before the farmer's wrath. He stopped when his arm got tired, not when my debt was paid, because it was never paid. He stood over me, panting, his face flushed. Clean this mess, he ordered, his voice still rough with rage. Then the north fence needs mending. A dozen posts came down in the wind. I want them set and wired by sundown. My blood ran cold. A dozen posts? in the hard-packed, semi-frozen ground. With my leg, it was impossible. A full-grown, able-bodied man would struggle to finish that task by nightfall. For me, it was a death sentence. He knew it. That was the point. He set goals I could never reach, creating a built-in excuse for the next punishment. It was a game he never lost. As his heavy boots stomped away, I stayed on the ground, every inch of my body a symphony of pain. But as I pushed myself up, my hand brushed against something hard under the loose dirt, a floorboard. One of the planks was warped, lifted just slightly at the edge. And in that moment, with the fire still singing on my back, a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years sparked in my chest. Not hope. Hope was a fool's game. It was curiosity. And on the Whitman homestead, curiosity was the most dangerous thing a boy could own. My mind should have been on the fence posts, on the impossible task and the punishment that would surely follow my failure. But it wasn't. It was on that loose floorboard. All day as I struggled with the post-hole digger, a tool that felt as tall and heavy as I was, my thoughts kept returning to the chicken coop. Every time I tried to force the digger into the stubborn earth, a jolt of pain shot up my leg, but my mind was elsewhere. What was under there? A rat's nest? A hollow space? Why did it feel so important? The sun began its descent, painting the vast empty sky in brutal shades of orange and pink. I'd managed to set 4 posts, 4 out of 12. My hands were raw, my back was screaming, and my leg felt like a dead weight I had to drag behind me. Failure was a certainty. I saw him coming from the house, a dark silhouette against the dying light. He didn't hurry. He knew what he'd find. He stopped at the fence line, surveyed my pathetic progress, and just shook his head slowly. He didn't need to yell this time. His silence was worse. It was the silence of a judge who had already passed sentence. That night was worse than the beating. No food, not even a crust of bread. He just pointed to the barn. "Get out of my sight." I lay in my pile of straw in the loft, shivering, my stomach a tight, aching knot. But the hunger and the cold couldn't extinguish the spark, the floorboard. I waited until the light in the main house went out, waited until I heard the faint sound of his snoring, carrying on the night wind. Then, moving like a shadow, I slipped out of the barn. My limp was silent in the soft dirt. Every step was agony, but this was a different kind of pain. This was pain with a purpose. Back in the chicken coop, the hens rustled nervously but didn't make a sound. They knew me. They knew I wasn't the danger. I knelt by the warped plank. My fingers, clumsy and stiff with cold, worked at the edge. It resisted, wedged tight. I fumbled in the dark for a rock, for anything to use as a lever. My hand closed around a small discarded piece of scrap metal. I wedged it into the gap in pride. The wood groaned in protest. It felt as loud as a gunshot in the dead of night. I froze, listening. Nothing but the wind. I pried again, putting all my wiry strength into it. With a final splintering crack, the board came loose. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I reached into the dark, hollow space beneath. My fingers brushed against dirt, then straw, then something else. Something cold and square. It was a box, a small metal box, heavy for its size. It was rusted and old but solid, and it was locked. I ran my fingers over its surface. There was a small keyhole on the front. A lock meant whatever was inside was valuable, worth protecting. I shook it gently. Nothing rattled. It was packed tight. What was it? Where did it come from? My first thought was Jeremiah, a hidden stash of money, but that didn't make sense. He was always complaining about being broke, about the cost of feed, the cost of me. If he had money, he wouldn't be living like this. He'd be drinking it away in Copper Falls. So if not his, then whose? A memory surfaced, blurry and faint. Martha. In her final weeks, she'd spent a lot of time out here, in the coop. Jeremiah said she just liked tending the chickens, that it was the only work she was still strong enough to do. But I remember seeing her, often, kneeling in this very corner. Not tending chickens, just kneeling. This was her box. It had to be. A wave of something fierce and protective washed over me. This was a secret, her secret. and now it was mine. I couldn't leave it here. If Jeremiah ever decided to repair the coop, he'd find it. I had to move it. I slid the box out. It was heavier than I expected. I carefully replaced the floorboard, scattering dirt over it to hide the marks. Then, clutching the box to my chest, I hobbled back to the barn. I hid it deep inside my pile of straw, a cold, hard secret in my miserable bed. I lay there, my mind racing. What was inside? Coins, jewelry, something that could change everything? But more important than what was in the box was the question of how to open it. I needed a key that had likely been hidden for years, a key that a man like Jeremiah Whitman would never, ever want me to find. The search for the key became my obsession. It was a silent, secret war waged right under Jeremiah's nose. My days were still filled with back-breaking labor and his relentless abuse, but now it was different. Before, I was just surviving. Now I had a mission. I started by watching him. I watched his every move, every habit. Where did he keep his own keys? On a hook by the door. I checked them one day when he was out mending the tractor. None of them were small enough. They were all for the barn, the shed, the main house. Big, clumsy iron keys. This key would be different. Small, delicate, a woman's key. That led me back to Martha. What was left of her in this house? Jeremiah had been thorough in his grief, or maybe his rage. He'd packed away most of her belongings in a large trunk in the attic of the main house, a place I was forbidden to go. Getting into the house was a risk. Getting into the attic was madness. But the thought of that box, of her secret, drove me. I waited for the day he made his monthly trip into Copper Falls for supplies. It was a day I usually dreaded, because he'd come back smelling of whiskey, and his temper would be even fouler. But today I prayed for it. He left just after dawn, his wagon rattling down the long dirt road. The moment it disappeared over the rise, I was moving. The house was quiet, eerily so. It felt like a tomb. Her ghost was everywhere, in the faded floral pattern of the kitchen curtains, in the faint scent of lavender that still clung to a cushion on her rocking chair. This was the first time I'd been in the main house alone, and it felt like trespassing on sacred ground. The attic stairs were steep and narrow, hidden behind a small door in the hallway. They creaked under my weight, each step a protest that echoed in the silent house. I paused, listening, my heart in my throat. But there was only silence. The attic was a single large room under the eaves, choked with dust and forgotten things. Sunlight streamed in through a single grimy window, illuminating dancing dust motes. In the center of the room sat a large dark wood trunk. It was unlocked. My hands trembled as I lifted the heavy lid. A wave of mothballs and old fabric washed over me. Inside, her life was neatly folded. Dresses, bonnets, a pair of delicate leather gloves. Beneath the clothes, I found a small wooden sewing box. I lifted it out. It was light. Inside, spools of thread, needles, a silver thimble, and tucked into a small velvet pouch I found it, a tiny brass key. It was ornate, with a small, heart-shaped head. It was perfect. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that this was the key. I didn't dare take it with me. He might notice it was gone from the sewing box, unlikely as that was. Instead, I did something I'd seen a blacksmith do once in town. I took a small bar of soap I'd swiped from the washstand and a piece of paper. I pressed the key deep into the soap, making a perfect impression of its shape. Then I carefully traced the impression onto the paper. My plan was insane. It was the plan of a desperate, foolish child, but it was the only one I had. I was going to make my own key. Back in the barn, I studied the drawing. The shape was complex. I needed metal, something soft enough to shape but strong enough to work a lock. My eyes fell on an old discarded food tin. It was thin, but it might work. Over the next few days, I stole moments whenever I could. Using a shard of broken glass, I painstakingly scraped and cut a piece of the tin, following the tracing from the paper. It was slow, frustrating work. My hands were clumsy, and the metal was sharp. I cut my fingers a dozen times, hiding the bloodstains from Jeremiah. Slowly, agonizingly, a crude shape began to emerge. It was a rough, ugly thing, nothing like the delicate brass original. But the shape was there. The teeth were jagged, but they were in the right places. I spent hours filing it down with a rusty nail file I found near the trash heap. Filing, checking it against the drawing, filing again. It was the most important thing I had ever made in my life. After a week of secret work, it was done. My key, my hope. That night the weight was unbearable. I lay in the straw, the metal key clutched in my hand, the box a hard lump beside me. When the house was finally dark and silent, I slipped back to the coop. It felt safer there, more private. With shaking hands, I pulled the box from its hiding spot under the floor. I took a deep breath. My homemade key felt flimsy and ridiculous. This was never going to work. I slid the key into the lock. It was a tight fit. It scraped and resisted. My heart sank. It was too rough. It wasn't going to turn. I pushed it harder, wiggling it gently. There was a faint click as it slid all the way in. I held my breath. Using my thumb and forefinger, I tried to turn it. Nothing. It was stuck fast. Tears of frustration welled in my eyes. So close. All that work, all that risk, for nothing. I was about to give up when I remembered something about old rusty locks. You had to jiggle them. I put pressure on the key, turning it to the right while wiggling it up and down. A tiny grating movement. Then another. It was shifting something inside. I kept the pressure on, wiggling, turning, my knuckles white, and then I heard it. Click. The sound was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. It was the sound of a door opening, the sound of a secret finally giving way. My hands were sweating. I paused, my ear to the box. What if it was a trap? What if something horrible was inside? But my curiosity was a raging fire now, burning away all fear. I lifted the lid. The first thing I saw was paper, old yellowed paper, bundled and tied with a ribbon. But underneath it, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just a few coins. The box was lined with velvet, and it was filled, absolutely filled with money. Not pennies and nickels. There were silver dollars, dozens of them, stacked in neat columns, and underneath them, thick wads of paper bills held together with paper bands. It was a fortune. More money than I had ever seen in my life. More money than Jeremiah Whitman probably made in 10 years. This wasn't just savings. This was an escape. My hands trembled as I lifted out the bundle of papers on top. It was a letter. Several pages folded together, written in a neat, elegant hand. Martha's hand. My reading was poor. I'd only had a year of formal schooling before my parents died, but I could make out the words, sounding them out slowly in the pale moonlight that filtered through the cracks in the coop walls. It began with two words that sent a shiver down my spine. Dearest sister. This wasn't a diary. It was a letter she never sent. I began to read and the world fell away. The chicken coop, the cold, Jeremiah, my own pain. It all disappeared. There was only the letter and the quiet, desperate voice of a woman I thought I knew. I fear I am running out of time, the letter began. His temper grows worse with each passing month. The disappointment has curdled in him, turned him into something I no longer recognize. He speaks of the cattle, of the debts, but the darkness was in him long before that. He hides it from the world, from the folks in town. They see a hard-working man, grieving his wife and his luck. They do not see the man who bolts the door at night. They do not hear the silence that follows his rage. My blood turned to ice. She wasn't talking about his bitterness. She was talking about his cruelty, the same cruelty he showed me. I had thought his anger was born of grief for her, but the letter was telling me something else. He had been this way when she was alive. She had been a prisoner too. I read on, my eyes straining in the dim light. She wrote about the money, how she had saved it over years, $1 at a time. Money from her dowry that she had told him was lost. Money from selling her mother's jewelry, a secret trip to a neighboring town. Every coin in this box was an act of defiance. It is my hope, she wrote, my escape. I have nearly enough. Enough for a train ticket east, back to you. Enough to start over, somewhere he can never find me. I pretend to be frail, to be content in my quiet life. But every moment I am planning, Every dollar I hide is a footstep on the road away from this place. And then came the part that made my heart stop. I have discovered I am with child. This should be a joy, but it is a terror. It has trapped me. I cannot run now, not in my condition. I must wait. I pray the child is a son, a strong son. Perhaps a son is the only thing that can soothe the beast in him. Perhaps a child will change his heart. But the child hadn't saved her. It had been her end. The baby, a girl, had died in childbirth, and Martha had followed a week later from a fever. Jeremiah had told the story to anyone who would listen, a tragic tale of a man who lost everything at once. But the letter painted a different picture. Her pregnancy hadn't been a hope for a happy family. It had been a cage. The last page was dated only a few weeks before she died. Her handwriting was shakier. The boy arrived today. The county sent him. He is small and broken, with a twisted leg. Jeremiah looks at him with such contempt, the same way he began to look at me when he realized my body was not as strong as he demanded. I see the same story beginning again. I try to be kind to the boy, to give him what little comfort I can. I see in his eyes the same fear I have learned to hide so well. He is another broken thing on this broken farm. I wish I could take him with me when I go, but I can't. This money is for one, my one chance. She had seen it. She had seen me. She had understood. I folded the letter, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage it. This box wasn't a treasure, it was a testament. It was the last will and testament of a woman who had died trying to escape a monster. And he was still here, sleeping in her bed, walking on her floors, and every single day he was turning me into her. A new feeling settled over me, cold and hard as the silver dollars in the box. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something else. It was rage. This money wasn't his. It would never be his. It was hers. And now it was my secret to protect. I wasn't just a boy hiding from a beating anymore. I was the guardian of Martha's last hope. The secret of the box changed the rhythm of my life. The beatings didn't stop. The impossible chores didn't end. But now when Jeremiah's belt fell on my back, I had a shield. It wasn't a physical shield, but a mental one. I would retreat into the knowledge of the box. I would think of Martha. I would think of the money, her money, hidden safely away. It gave the pain a purpose. I was enduring this for her. My new mission was to protect the box at all costs. The chicken coop was no longer safe. It was the first place I had thought of. It could be the first place he looked, if he ever had a reason to. I needed somewhere better, somewhere he would never go. Deep in the woods that bordered the homestead, there was an ancient fallen oak tree, hollowed out by time and rot. It was a good mile from the house, a difficult walk with my leg, but that's what made it perfect. Jeremiah never ventured that far. The woods were useless to him. One night I made the journey. I wrapped the box in an old oilcloth to protect it from the damp and carried it, heavy and precious, through the darkness. The familiar sounds of the night woods, things that used to scare me, now felt like allies. The hoot of an owl, the rustle of a creature in the undergrowth. They were the sentinels of my secret. I placed the box deep inside the hollow log, packing loose leaves and dirt around it. It was invisible, safe. With the box secured, a strange new confidence began to grow in me. I was no longer just the victim. I was a secret keeper. This knowledge made me bold, and boldness was a dangerous currency on this farm. A few weeks later, a visitor arrived. This was a rare event. It was a man on horseback, wearing a dusty coat and a tin star on his chest. The sheriff. His name was Brody, and he wasn't like the other men I'd seen. His eyes were sharp, and they didn't miss anything. He'd stopped for water for his horse, but I could tell he was looking for more than that. Jeremiah put on his town face, the grieving, hard-working farmer. "Sheriff, a surprise to see you out this far." "Just making my rounds, Whitman," Brody said, his eyes scanning the yard. They landed on me as I carried a bucket of water. I tried not to limp, which only made my gait more awkward. He saw it, and he saw the way I flinched when Jeremiah looked at me. "That the boy the county placed with you?" Brody asked, his voice casual, but his eyes were not. "That's him," Jeremiah said, with a sigh that was perfectly practiced for pity. "A bit of a burden, I'm afraid. Not strong, but we make do. The Lord tests us all. Sheriff Brody dismounted and walked over to me. He was a tall man and he smelled of leather and clean air. He knelt down so he was at my level, something no adult had ever done. "What's your name, son?" he asked, his voice quiet and kind. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I'd almost forgotten. I glanced at Jeremiah, who was watching us, his face a thundercloud. "He's not much of a talker," Jeremiah said quickly. Brody ignored him. He kept his eyes on me. "I see you've got a bad leg. Does it give you much trouble?" I just nodded, my throat tight. The sheriff's eyes then flicked to my arm, where the edge of a fresh bruise peeked out from under my sleeve. I tried to pull it back, but he'd seen it. His gaze sharpened for a fraction of a second, then went back to being friendly. It was like watching a hawk spot a mouse in a field. Quick, precise, and deadly. He stood up. "Well, Whitman, you keep a clean yard." He looked around again, his gaze lingering on the barn, the house, me. "The circuit judge will be in Copper Falls next month. Likes to hear reports on all the county placements. I'll be sure to tell him you're making do." There was an edge to his voice, a warning. Jeremiah heard it too. His face tightened. "We do our Christian duty," Jeremiah said, his voice stiff. As Brody mounted his horse, he looked directly at me one last time. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was a message. "I see you." The moment the sheriff was gone, Jeremiah's mask dropped. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in like talons. "What did you say to him?" "Nothing," I gasped. "I didn't say anything, Mr. Whitman, I swear." "You and your stupid face," he hissed, shaking me. "Always looking like a kicked dog. You think people don't notice? You're an embarrassment. A walking advertisement for my bad luck." He shoved me toward the barn. "You've wasted enough daylight. That manure pile isn't going to move itself." The beating that evening was worse than usual. It was frantic, panicked. He was angry about the sheriff's visit. He was scared. And when Jeremiah Whitman was scared, he was at his most dangerous. But as I lay in the straw later, the pain was different. Sheriff Brody's face kept appearing in my mind. His kind eyes, the way he knelt down to my level, the tiny nod. For the first time I realized there was a world beyond this farm, a world with laws, a world with sheriffs who saw things. Before, Martha's box was a secret to be protected. Now I realized it was something else. It wasn't just a secret, it was evidence. The sheriff's visit had planted a seed of fear in Jeremiah, and fear made him unpredictable. He started drinking more heavily. The trips to Copper Falls became more frequent, and he'd return in a black mood, muttering about banks and foreclosures. The farm was failing, faster than I realized. He was losing everything, just as he had with Martha and the cattle. And the more desperate he became, the more he started talking about money. "There has to be some," I'd hear him muttering to himself at the kitchen table, poring over old ledgers. "She couldn't have spent it all. Her family had money. She had to have hidden some." My blood ran cold. He wasn't just talking about household savings. He was talking about Martha's money. He knew, or at least suspected, that she had a secret stash. He just didn't know where it was. His search began. At first it was subtle, a drawer left open, a floorboard in the bedroom pried up. But as his desperation grew, the search became frantic. He was like a rabid dog digging for a bone. He ripped through Martha's old trunk in the attic, scattering her dresses and belongings. He tore apart the stuffing in her rocking chair. He pulled up sections of the floor in the parlor. The house was being turned inside out. Every day I lived in terror that he would stumble upon the chicken coop, that he would remember Martha spending time there, that he would find the loose board. But my terror was matched by a grim satisfaction. He was destroying her memory piece by piece, looking for the very thing that proved what a monster he was, and he would never find it. I knew I had to check on the box. I needed to see it, to reassure myself it was still safe in the hollow log. Waiting for an opportunity was agony. I had to be sure he was gone for hours. My chance came when a wheel on his wagon broke. He had to ride the horse into town to get it fixed, a half-day trip at least. The moment he was out of sight, I fled to the woods. My leg protested with every step. but I ran, fueled by adrenaline. I reached the fallen oak tree, my heart pounding. I knelt down, cleared away the leaves and dirt, and reached into the hollow. My fingers met empty space. No. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. I scrambled at the opening, digging frantically. My hands were scraped raw by the rough wood. It wasn't there. The box was gone. He'd found it. He must have followed me. He knew. It was all over. I was dead. All those beatings, all the pain I'd endured to protect it, it was all for nothing. I collapsed against the log, my body shaking with dry, racking sobs. I had failed her. I had failed Martha. How could I have been so stupid? I thought I was being clever, but I was just a boy, a foolish, crippled boy playing a man's game, and I had lost. I lay there for what felt like hours, a hollowed-out shell of despair. The woods, which had felt like my sanctuary, now felt like a trap. There was nowhere to run. He would be waiting for me back at the house, the box open, the letter in his hand. Slowly I forced myself to my feet. I had to go back. I had to face him. There was no other choice. It was better than waiting for him to hunt me down. The walk back to the homestead was a death march. Every step was heavy with dread. I imagined the look on his face, the triumphant rage in his eyes. The belt was too good for me now. He would use his fists. Or worse. I came out of the woods and saw the farm, the house, the barn, the coop, my prison, my grave. I crept toward the house, my body braced for the inevitable explosion. I peeked through the kitchen window, and what I saw made no sense at all. Jeremiah was there. He must have gotten back early. But he wasn't waiting for me in a rage. He was on his hands and knees, prying up the floorboards by the fireplace. His face was slick with sweat, his expression one of manic frustration. The room was a disaster zone. Furniture overturned, drawers emptied. He hadn't found the box. If he had found it, he wouldn't still be looking. He'd be celebrating, or he'd be waiting to kill me. So if he didn't have it, who did? A new thought, sharp and terrifying, pierced through my confusion. Someone else knew about the money. Someone else had been watching. My mind flashed to Sheriff Brody, his sharp eyes, the way he'd scanned the property. Could he have come back? Could he have been searching for evidence against Jeremiah? Or was it someone else entirely? A traveler? A neighbor? I was no longer in a two-person battle. There was a third player in the game, a ghost who had managed to do what I couldn't, get caught, and what Jeremiah couldn't. Find the prize. I backed away from the window, my mind spinning. The box was gone. Jeremiah was tearing his house apart looking for it, and I was trapped in the middle, the only one who knew the whole truth, but with no proof and no allies. I stumbled back toward the barn, my sanctuary, needing a place to think. As I slipped through the big barn doors, my foot hit something on the ground. I looked down. Lying in the dirt was a single shiny silver dollar. It hadn't been there this morning. It was placed right in the entryway, almost deliberately, like a message. And then I knew. The box wasn't stolen by a stranger. It was moved. By someone who knew I would be the one to find this coin. Someone who was trying to tell me something. But who? And what were they trying to say? That they had the box? Or was it a warning? I picked up the coin. It was cold and heavy in my hand. This wasn't a game of cat and mouse anymore. It was a game of ghosts. And I was being haunted. The silver dollar felt like a burning coal in my pocket. It was a clue, but a clue to a puzzle I couldn't understand. I went back to the hollow log in the woods, my mind racing. I searched the ground, desperate for another sign. A footprint, a broken branch. Anything. There was nothing. Whoever had taken the box was careful, a professional, not a clumsy, angry man like Jeremiah. Not a lawman who would leave evidence. This was someone else. I spent the day in a state of high alert. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of the house made me jump. Jeremiah continued his frantic, fruitless search, his mood growing blacker by the hour. He was a caged animal, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he turned his rage on me again. That night, the impossible happened. I was in the loft pretending to sleep when I heard a sound outside, a soft whistle, the call of a night bird, but it was wrong. It was too melodic, too human. It came again, from the direction of the woods. My heart hammered. This was it. A signal. For me. With a stealth I didn't know I possessed, I slipped out of the barn. I moved through the shadows, my limp a silent shuffle in the dust. I followed the sound, my hand clutching the silver dollar in my pocket. In a small clearing just inside the tree line, a figure was waiting. The moon was bright enough that I could see their outline. It was a man, but not a big man. And he was holding something. The box. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. The figure stepped forward into a patch of moonlight. My mind reeled. I was expecting a stranger. A threat. I was not expecting him. It was Mr. Abernathy, our closest neighbor. He was a quiet, elderly man who lived on a small farm about 2 miles down the road. Jeremiah hated him, called him a nosy old gossip. Martha had been fond of him. She used to send me over with pies or fresh bread. He had always been kind to me, giving me a piece of candy and asking about my leg with genuine concern. "Evening, boy," he said, his voice a low whisper. "Figured that coin would get your attention." He held up the box. "I believe this is what you were looking for." I was speechless. How? Why? "I saw you," he explained, seeing the confusion on my face. "Saw you heading out to these woods a few weeks back, carrying a heavy load. It was late. It struck me as odd. Then yesterday, I saw you running out here again, looking panicked. I put two and two together." He'd been watching, not me. He'd been watching the Whitman place. "Martha asked me to," he said softly, and the world tilted on its axis. "Years ago, she told me she was afraid of him, afraid of what he might do. She told me if anything ever happened to her, if she died unexpectedly, that I should watch over the farm, watch out for anything strange." He looked down at the box in his hands. "She never told me about this, but she told me she had a nest egg, a way out. I guess this is it." He had come to the woods after seeing my panic, searched the area and found the hollow log. He had taken the box to protect it, to protect me. "He's getting worse, isn't he?" Abernathy said. It wasn't a question. "I hear his yelling clear over at my place some nights. I've been worried, especially since Sheriff Brody stopped by my place a while back, asking questions." The sheriff. He hadn't just visited Jeremiah. He was investigating, building a case. "What's in the letter, son?" Abernathy asked gently. My throat was thick with emotion. I had been so alone for so long. To have someone else know, to have an ally. It was overwhelming. I told him everything. About the letter, about Martha's plan to escape, about how she knew what a monster Jeremiah was. Abernathy listened, his weathered face grim. When I was done, he nodded slowly. "I knew it. I knew he was the reason she was gone. The doctor said fever, but I never believed it. A man like that, he can break a person's spirit, and when the spirit breaks, the body follows." He handed the box to me. "This belongs to you now, I reckon. You're the one she was worried about at the end. But you can't keep it here. He's tearing the house apart. He's going to find it." "What do I do?" I whispered. "You use it as a weapon," Abernathy said, his voice hard. "You have the truth in your hands. And the truth, son, is more powerful than any belt." He told me his plan. It was simple, it was brilliant, and it was terrifyingly dangerous. The next morning, Jeremiah was in a state of pure madness. He had found nothing, and his failure had pushed him over the edge. He stormed into the barn where I was milking the cow. "Where is it?" he roared, his eyes wild. "Where is what, Mr. Whitman?" I asked, my voice shaking, just as Abernathy had told me to. "Don't play dumb with me," he screamed, kicking over the milk pail. "The money! Her money! I know she had it, and I know she told you. The two of you, always whispering in corners. I saw you." He grabbed me, lifting me off my feet. "Tell me where it is, or I swear on your worthless life, I will end you right here." My heart was about to beat out of my chest, but I held on to Abernathy's words. "Be brave, son. You have the truth." "I don't know about any money," I choked out. "But I know she used to hide things in the chicken coop." It was the bait, and he took it. He dropped me and ran for the coop, a crazed look in his eyes. I followed, keeping a safe distance. He burst in, scattering the hens. He went straight for the back corner, the place he'd seen Martha kneeling all those years ago. He ripped up the loose floorboard I'd so carefully replaced. He reached into the empty space, his hands scrabbling in the dirt. He pulled them out. Empty. A strangled cry of pure fury escaped his lips. He spun around, his eyes locking on me, the face of a demon. "You're lying!" He lunged for me, but as he did, a new voice cut through the air. "Whitman, stop right there!" Sheriff Brody stood at the entrance to the coop, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip, and behind him stood Mr. Abernathy. Jeremiah froze. He looked from the sheriff to Abernathy, then back to me. He was trapped. "Sheriff, this is a misunderstanding," Jeremiah stammered, his mind racing to create a new lie. "The boy is a thief. He stole something from me. I was just getting it back." "Is that so?" Brody said, his voice dangerously calm. He walked into the coop, his eyes taking in the scene. The overturned floorboard, my terrified face, Jeremiah's wild expression. "Mr. Abernathy here tells me a different story," Brody continued. "He tells me you've been looking for something that belonged to your late wife, something she was saving." "That's a lie," Jeremiah blustered. "He's a nosy old fool." "And I suppose the boy's a liar too?" the sheriff asked, looking at me. "Tell me, son, what was Mr. Whitman looking for?" This was the moment. My voice was small, but it was clear, and for the first time I didn't stutter. "He was looking for Martha's box," I said, "the one with her escape money in it." The words hung in the air. Jeremiah's face went pale. "And her letter," I added, my voice growing stronger. "The one where she wrote about how she was scared of him, and how she knew he'd be the death of her." It was a bluff. A beautiful, terrible bluff. Abernathy hadn't found a letter. There was no letter in the box, only the money. Martha's letter, the one I had found, was tucked safely away, a secret only I knew. But Jeremiah didn't know that. He believed the letter existed and the sheriff had it. In his mind, the walls were closing in, his secrets laid bare for all to see. He believed his dead wife had reached out from the grave to condemn him. The lie broke him. He lunged, not at me, not at the sheriff. He lunged for the exit, a desperate, wild attempt to flee. He never made it. Sheriff Brody was faster. He tackled Jeremiah, bringing him down hard in the dirt and chicken filth. The fight was brief and ugly. When it was over, Jeremiah Whitman was in handcuffs, his face pressed into the ground he had lorded over for so long. As Sheriff Brody hauled him to his feet, Jeremiah's eyes found mine. They were filled with a burning, impotent hatred. "You!" he spat. "You worthless, broken thing. I should have drowned you the day you arrived." "The circuit judge is going to be very interested to hear all about this, Whitman," Sheriff Brody said, dragging him away. "And about the bruises on this boy that matched the pattern of your belt." I stood there watching them go, Mr. Abernathy's hand resting on my shoulder. The sun was rising, casting long shadows across the yard. It felt like the first real morning of my life. I had done it. I had protected Martha's secret. I had faced the monster, and I had won. With Jeremiah Whitman in jail awaiting trial, a strange quiet settled over the homestead. The air itself felt lighter, cleaner. The constant weight of fear I had lived under for 2 years was gone, and its absence was a vast open space I didn't know how to navigate. Mr. Abernathy stayed with me, his quiet presence a comfort. He helped me with the chores, and for the first time, they didn't feel like punishments. They just felt like work that needed doing. Sheriff Brody came back a few days later. He brought supplies from town and a stack of legal papers. He sat with me at the kitchen table, the same table where Jeremiah used to count his coins and curse my existence. "Jeremiah confessed to everything," Brody said. "The beatings, the neglect. He even confessed he suspected Martha had hidden money. He's not going to see the outside of a prison cell for a very long time." Then he pushed the metal box across the table. Abernathy had given it to him. "According to the law, since Martha had no surviving relatives she named, this belongs to you now. It's a lot of money, son. A chance to start over, anywhere you want." I opened the box. The silver dollars and paper bills gleamed. Martha's hope, her escape. And now it was mine. But I didn't want to run. I had spent my whole life being run out of places, being passed along, being a burden. For the first time, I had a choice. There are other kids like me, I said, my voice quiet. Kids the county doesn't know what to do with. Kids who end up in places like this. Brody and Abernathy looked at each other. I want to stay, I said, a new determination hardening in my chest. I want to use this money to buy this farm, but I don't want it to be the Whitman place anymore. The trial was a formality. Jeremiah was found guilty on multiple counts of abuse and criminal neglect. He was sentenced to 20 years of hard labor. As they led him away, he looked like what he was, a small, bitter man, finally broken by the consequences of his own cruelty. With the help of Sheriff Brody and Mr. Abernathy, I did exactly what I said I would. The law was complicated, but Martha's money was persuasive. The farm was purchased out of foreclosure and put into a trust, managed by Abernathy until I came of age. But we didn't keep it as a farm. We began to change it. We repaired the fences, not to keep things in, but to welcome them. We painted the house, erasing the years of grime and sadness. We tore down the old dark barn where I had shivered through so many nights of pain and fear. And in its place, we built something new, a large, clean dormitory with warm beds and big windows. We called it the Copper Falls Home for Children. The first children arrived a year later, two small, scared sisters whose parents had been lost in a flash flood. I saw the same fear in their eyes that I had once carried in my own, but I didn't see a burden. I saw a family. I showed them to their room with its brightly colored quilts and a view of the rolling hills. I showed them the kitchen where there was always fresh bread and warm milk. I showed them the fields where they could run and play, not work until they collapsed. I never told them the full story of what had happened there. They didn't need to know about the ghost of Jeremiah Whitman or the terrible sadness of his wife. All they needed to know was that they were safe, that they were wanted. Years passed. The home grew. More children came, each with their own story of loss and hardship, and each one found a sanctuary. I grew older, my legs still twisted, my limp still pronounced. But it was no longer a mark of shame. It was just a part of me, like the color of my eyes or the memories I carried. It was a reminder that you could be broken in one place, but still be whole. I often walked out to the chicken coop, the only original structure we had left standing. I'd sit on the step and think about Martha. I never found her sister, the one the letter was written to, but in a way, I felt like I had fulfilled her final wish. Her money hadn't allowed her to escape, but it had created an escape for dozens of others. Her hope had become a legacy. Her secret was finally safe. The greatest monsters aren't hiding in the dark woods. They're the ones who lock the doors and pretend to be good men. The story of the Whitman farm is a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, a single act of courage, a hidden box, a secret kept, can be enough to light a fire that brings the whole rotten structure crashing down. If you believe that justice found its way in the end, and that the smallest voices sometimes have the most important stories to tell, then hit that subscribe button and join our community. Every story matters, and we have so many more to share.